All right, welcome to the course. So, we will start by answering this question. What is user experience research or user research or UX research? There are so many terms that do mean the same thing. Before we dive into it, I would love you to take a moment and to contemplate this. We can keep on using very different terms, we can keep on making things look fancy and sound fancy, but really, research is about listening to people. So you can see this is a General Electric story where initially there was someone who spent a lot of time working on an MRI machine for kids. And what happened is that at the end of the day, kids didn't want to get into that machine. The kids were the end users, so they would go on to use this MRI machine. And obviously, this shows that there was a lack of user empathy, a lack of understanding that who are you serving? Are you serving kids or are you serving someone else? And so General Electric actually decided to rethink this. And now we have this MRI machine that looks like one that kids would love to hop on because finally we actually mapped to what they are looking for. So this is very powerful as an example. And I just want you to keep that in mind that research can sound fancy, can sound scientific, but actually research or user research is about listening to people and putting ourselves in their shoes and thinking about how can we best serve them whatever we are building for them. How can we best serve them? So there are two requirements. You need to be in touch with who you are serving, so you can't just keep on building something and you're completely blinded by who is going to use it. And you have to keep on being in touch with who you are serving. That's the other thing, because as you are building your solutions, your products, you need to keep in touch. And that brings me to my second part here, which is it's important for you to understand the design process. What is it that is bringing you from zero to an actual product that people are going to use? So it's not just about applications, it's about anything that is built. There is service design. So you build a service. Let's say you go to a bank and then there is a customer experience there. Or you build an application that's user experience. Or you build cosmetics products. That's also a customer experience that has a product and it has an experience and service in it. So it's anything that you're creating really. This is what I'm creating right now is a learning experience. So you, my users, you are using my learning content so you can learn. So you are my users. So before I did this, I had to research, I had to understand who is going to take this course, who is going to take a moment and go and discover this course and then buy it so they could learn. So I had to think a little bit about what should I give you. So you can see research is not happening only in one particular moment. Research is happening particularly when you are what we call discovery research. It's at the very beginning. And then later on, when you start ideating and brainstorming, there is a validation research or user walkthrough research. And then finally, there is user testing research. So you have three flavors almost. And this means that as you are going into this iterative process, and the design process is a very iterative one, but research should be a part of everything that you do, be it discovery, be it validation, and be it user testing. So when you discover means you are getting to know your users. When you are doing validation, meaning that you have built something, a prototype, some sort of like solution idea, and you want to get validation and see if you're doing the right thing. So that's a little bit later in the process. And then when you build something, maybe a prototype, you don't want to build completely the solution and then test it because that could be costly. You then end up uh, actually testing it with actual people before you put it out there in the market. So you see, there are three ways, and obviously, you can always have research. You will see it's a lot of common sense than common practice. It's as you become more and more versed in the design process, you will know that at particular touch points, you will need to sprinkle some research in there. So we call it user research because it's the user experience is related to an app. But if you're not doing a user experience, and we will have a case study that's not about an app, you will see how this process actually works in any situation. So user research again is anything that involves getting to know who you are serving. And who you are serving are people. We call them users, but they're just people. And you make sure that whatever you're building it for them and you're getting their feedback as you go. I hope that that gave you a little bit of an overview. So obviously there are different types of research. There is this user research that I showed you where you do an effort. It's called like it's an actual curation. You actually go and do the effort. So it's a research that's kind of requires an effort. But there is another one that is about online research. So you can just go and look at what's out there. And then there are product stakeholders. Always when you work on a research projects, especially in the software world, you have people who make decisions, who have business goals. So you have to think about how can you best serve them and how can you best serve the user. So there is always this balance and back and forth. Let's take a look at some research methodologies. So before starting any research projects, before actually I dive into this, the filters, research methodologies are all the filters we use to analyze the usability of our solutions. So before starting any user research project, you need to ask yourself, is this a new product or is this a redesign of an existent product? So if you are doing a new product, then it means you are working on generative research. You're starting from scratch. You're working on those steps that I mentioned: discovery, testing, validation, then testing. And then obviously there is evaluative research, which means that you have something that's existent and you want to improve it and redesign it. So you have to evaluate and get feedback. So that's another type of research, but they're all using the same processes and mechanisms. So these are the most common user research techniques. Frankly, you don't yet get to use them all as a user researcher or as a researcher in general, because you don't have to be a user researcher to do this, by the way. You just have to have a heart and be a human being, and you can do it in any field. If you're a dentist, you can do client research. If you are an engineer, you can do it. If you are a project manager, you can always sprinkle user research. It's really a mindset of serving who you are serving. So there are multiple UX research methods. Obviously, the ones that are the ones that I personally use the most is the following. There is user interviews. There are surveys. There is usability testing. There is A/B testing, analytics, and focus groups. So these are the ones that I use the most in my work. But others, depending on the industry where you live, in your industry, then you will have to adjust. So there are different types. So you see there is eye tracking, we'll go over it. There is tree testing. There is 5-second testing. There is card sorting. So I've used card sorting once, especially when you're working on trying to identify how to name things like a navigation or information architecture. Field studies, I've done field studies actually in my master's research because I had to go and observe people. So it's very ethnographic. You just go observe. You actually are on the field. Sometimes you ask people questions, and obviously focus groups is so common. User interviews is the most common one. Especially this is happening in the discovery phase when you discover who you are serving. Usability testing, etc. So this is just to give you an idea, and you can see that each one of them will be in a certain situation. So you see these ones are qualitative and attitudinal, which means that they are relying on what people say, and they're qualitative. There is a why and how. While these ones, for example, A/B testing, you test two things. Let's say you're not sure how to design an interface, design an actual app section. like a screen. So you do it version 1, version 2, and you test it, or you can even implement it and then see how people interact with it. And then you get the analytics. So who clicked when, how many people clicked in this, how many people were confused, how long did it take for them to understand this. Or it could be an A/B test that doesn't have to have like an actual experience. You can just show them two things and they can pick. So it's really about A and B. It's not really how, but usually it's quantitative, meaning that you do implement this in your system and you see how it's going to work. So that's very important. Um, there are some very general guidelines that I want you to focus on. They're called usability heuristics. It's very, very, very important for you to know them. They are key. You need to dive into them more. I will go over them, but you need to practice using them. And obviously, they are coming from Nielsen Norman. He's a big person in the field of user experience, user research. He has the Nielsen Norman sites where you can learn about this. But I'll give you an overview. So you see there's visibility of system status, match between the system and the real world, user control and freedom, consistency and standards, error prevention, recognition rather than recall, flexibility and efficiency of use, aesthetic and minimalistic design, help users with errors, help and documentation. So all of this helps you make sure that these are almost like best practices that you keep in mind as you create any experience, but this is very specific to a user experience that involves a user interface. When I say user interface, it means that it's an actual app experience or website experience or web experience. But these principles transfer to any other solution that you're building, be it a learning experience. So I try to apply this in my designs or in my slides. Be it a service, like maybe you're designing a kiosk where people can go and interact with it to order food. So you see, there is a lot of these principles. They're called usability. Is making sure that whatever you build is actually usable by people, that it's minimum frustration for them. It doesn't have to be digital. It can be an actual chair. See, initially all of this worked in the real world, the physical world. It was called ergonomics. And then it became human centered design or interaction design. And then now it became more of usability heuristics. And user researchers, what do? They actually, whenever they're analyzing an existent situation, what they're doing is that they take that existent app, for example, and they would analyze it against all of these variables that you're seeing, all of these principles, and then they would give a particular um, severity score. So, is this a problem in this particular interaction? Is there a problem with it? How severe is this problem? And then they would have an actual score at the end that's called heuristics evaluation score. So, this exercise of actually analyzing an experience or solution against these usability principles is called a heuristics evaluation, and you can apply it in any world, not just the app world. So this is very important. So they use tables, so you can search that and dive deeper into it. So let's take a look at a few of these examples. So the first one is match between the system and the real world. You can see here that we have the icons, and colors used in the screen correspond to objects or signs from the real world. So you can see this is a bell. So somebody knows that a bell is going to give you surprising information and notify you. So a bell for notifications is a good thing. People can understand it because it's transferring from the physical to the actual digital world. We have here user control and freedom. Um, you always give the people you're serving. I always call them the people you're serving, you end users, because end users makes it less human, but really these are people. So make sure you give people you're serving the possibility to have control over what they have. So they can save a draft, they can discard, they can come back, they can edit, re-edit, they can save. So you see, this is an example of user control. Consistency and standards. So imagine you're a company, you have three sites. You have, let's say, Uber Eats, and let's say Uber. workplace. Let's just imagine that Uber has three companies. You actually do want to have a consistent experience. So if you go from an Uber Eats to an Uber normal app, you kind of see that there is a look and feel that's very similar. Things are very looking like similar. So you can see consistency and standard is an important thing. Microsoft is doing it with Word, Excel, PowerPoint. You can see they're all having the same thing here. So you kind of transfer, you're in a Microsoft app, you're not in a Google app because there is something in common between them. Visibility of the system. You can see this is one of the navigational elements that show you where you're located. So there is a visibility of where you are. You can come back. It's more of a navigational thing, it's an information architecture thing. It's not letting the user be blind and not knowing what's happening or where they are. You give them a localization. Error prevention. So remember, there are a few apps now that help you do that. And one example that really stays with me all the time is the example of password when they tell you, okay, write this password and then rewrite it again. And sometimes what I do is I copy and paste, and they would block me from copying and pasting. They want me to actually write the password. So I know what I'm writing and I didn't make any mistake because I could have put a password and then I don't remember what it is. And then what happens is I copy and paste and then I just don't remember. I need to make sure I rewrite it so I see that the password I wrote is what I think it is, and you're good to go. So there are some apps now that are very smart that don't allow you to copy paste the password. You actually have to rewrite it when creating a new account. And you see this is another example, like, or making sure that you're writing a valid email address, that you're entering a valid phone number with the right like area code, etc. So error prevention is a big important thing. Cognitive load. So this is the cognitive load. You see, these are the selected filters. You can see that this is very much like you don't really know what to do. You have so many, you're overloaded with so many like tabs. What if we made you do something that would make you less think too much. So you can just select what you just ordered and just do it, or you could select the services. So I'm giving you options where you don't have to remember whatever you did. So remember, like DoorDash. DoorDash is one of those apps that is really smart. If you know restaurants and you know what you like, they just make you click reorder. You don't have to remember what you took last time. Because when you have to remember, you're putting a strain on your brain, on your memory, and this means it's cognitive load, and people hate that. And also we're becoming lazier and lazier. All right, aesthetics and minimalism. So you can see here, this is a Forbes, and imagine Forbes, look at their search. Look at when you dive into the landing page, their search is so straightforward and minimalistic, and it just like is one thing, one action, one task. It's true that we're diving into a world that's less and less colorful, that's more straightforward, but minimalism is good because anything that happens in confusion is bad. It makes us frustrated, it makes us completely lost. But when you actually make people focus and you give them one thing to do on a screen, it's a minimalistic approach. Look at my slides here. Do you see something that's making you feel like you're overwhelmed? Do you see a lot of text? Do you see like icons that don't make sense? No. You see that it's very straightforward. It's making you focus on this particular section. So this applies to this world of learning design. While there are other people who are applying it in user experience design, while other people can apply it in a service design. So think about minimalism and aesthetics and how you can make it. It's remember, it's very difficult to make something simple. It's very difficult. It looks simple, but it's actually complex. There is a lot of thinking that went into it. And we say that good design is actually design that fits your needs so well that you can't see it. If you start to think about the design, to think about what you're using, and you're just to analyze it and you're just like not good with it and you're trying to make sense of it, it means that it is not invisible. When it's invisible, it fits your needs so well that you're flowing with that experience. And when you flow with that experience, it makes you have a good experience. And so that means that the product or solution that we've built is really geared towards you. It means that we heard you and we know you, and we built something that's working for you. So remember, simple is actually not means simplistic. It means complex. It means there is a lot of thinking that went into it. It means that there is a lot of empathy that went into it. So keep that in mind. Minimalism doesn't mean less, it actually means more. Error messaging. So let's take a moment and think about this. It's very important, and we all hate when something goes wrong and there is no communication. You don't know what's happening, or they give you some sort of, like you see here, it's a very technical term, like General Error Network 404. Who would understand this? Just tell me. Who would understand this? Nobody. But if I tell you, please check your connectivity, there is a poor network, then I would understand it. So error messaging is so powerful, is so important in experience design. You always have to keep people in mind. Imagine this service, an immigration experience. So you are an immigrant and you are trying to get your paperwork to get a residency. So imagine I am not telling you what is happening in the background. Imagine the frustration, imagine the confusion, the stress that you would feel. We tell you, oh, your file, your case is being processed, and you have no idea what's happening to it. So that's very bad because you leave people, just think about it, you leave people in a sort of situation where they don't know what's happening, what's next, where is their case in the process. And there are a lot of immigration systems that work like this. And where something is blocked, you don't know why it's blocked. You don't know if there is an investigation, you don't know if you did something wrong, you don't know what's the outcome. So imagine this error, the error or the progress. Actually, it's more progress messaging and error messaging. We are making you aware, we are very transparent with you, or making you aware of where you are in this whole process. So I just covered kind of the key ones. I didn't cover all of them, but I think we covered most of them. But you can always go and dive deeper into heuristics. These are the most common one, and you have to keep them in mind either when you're building something new or when you are evaluating something that's existent. But mostly it's evaluative research that uses heuristics. Okay, so we mentioned kind of all of these usability heuristics. Now let's dive into quantitative user research. And we've seen those types of user research methods. So quantitative research um, focuses on quantity. It focuses on data and analytics. So imagine you are working on a website and you want to know how are your people who are going into the website working. So where do they click? When do they convert to a new app? Where do we miss them? Where do they exit? Where do they scroll? Where are they confused? Do they leave feedback? Do they use the chat box? So all of this, there are tools like there is Pendo, there is like um, there is like a Pendo experience. There is other types of things where you can see that there is like Google Analytics that allow you to do this. So there is so much going on that you need to keep in mind when we mention data and analytics. There is also the answers of the what in your research. So when I mention what, it means that it's actually helping you understand what is happening. It's a lot of facts, it's a lot of data, it's a lot of statistics. And it usually requires a high amount of data to get insights into what you need. So sometimes it's good to see how many users are doing. So qualitative research is very different. You don't need a lot of people to make an experience happen. But quantitative research is actually very important. It's actually about quantifying an experience, and it's about making it super important to because you need a lot of users so you can make conclusions. There is market analysis. So there are other ways of working um, with research. So you have it helps you check what market is offering at what moment. So what kind of features do they have? What other competitors are telling you? So you don't always have to do some research. Sometimes you have studies that give you those numbers. We have analytics. So there is Google Analytics, I just mentioned it. There is Pendo. There are some metrics that are well known, like time on site, user flow path, where do they exit, etc. And then we have usability testing. So you get users to perform a task and give them some scenarios for the usage of the app. It can be done like online or in person. So I mentioned user testing is when you have a prototype or you have like something that's closest to the end results. Let's say you're building an app, so it's the closest you can get. Sometimes you can build a Figma prototype. Figma is a design tool where designers work on actual prototypes where people can click and interact, but it's not a coded experience. There is no code behind it. It's like a fake experience just so we can test. And usually there is a Google thing that says test often, test early. See, you have to be testing often, you have to be testing early, and you have to fail often and fail early. So it's good to test faster, build something that's working, test it with an end user, and then have them interact with that experience. So you can see it's very, very, very much an important thing to keep in mind. And then it helps you see where users are having problems, what works, and where the app experience fails. In person, you can track their nonverbal communication, their eye movement, etc. So there is a lot of going on in there, and it really helps you make an experience and make sure that you are doing the right thing for your end solution. I mentioned A/B testing. So you got two versions of your design, not sure what's the alternative features. You just test both and see which experience fits better the needs of your users. So one experience, let's say, is really similar. See, this is a landing page of a yoga teacher site. You either do something like this or you can do something like this. So you don't know which one works best. So you go and test it actually with people and see which one they prefer, which one there is more interaction. Sometimes there are sites that would embed an experience. So let's imagine Facebook. They would make you, they would test for a month this way of doing, or maybe YouTube. They would test this way and see if it's working with people, and then get all the analytics in Google Analytics or other analytical tools they're using, and then see which one is working and which one is not. And then there is this other one where it is more of a uh like you just test and then you can see, okay, the other one I did the same thing for a month, let's see how are people interacting, and then you can see, okay, which one is best. A lot of e-commerce sites on Shopify, for example, use this a lot, so you have to keep that in mind as you do A/B testing. And then obviously we have surveys. Surveys means asking people about their experiences. Usually it involves scale questions. It's good to have scale questions because they give you a number. Sometimes you don't want to have a lot of qualitative answers, like when they give people opinions. It's good to have like checkbox answers, multiple choice questions, etc. So we have qualitative user research. It looks at behaviors and emotions. So, qualitative user research is one of the most important ones because it's really where you build the empathy. I started with quantitative. You can do it at any point. You can do it towards the end, you can do it to evaluate an existing application. But qualitative user research is any user research that is about um, qualitative data. It is about behaviors, it's about emotions, it's about talking to people, it's about seeing how they behave, seeing their eye contact, seeing their nonverbal communication. It's all of these things. So we have user interviews is one of the most important parts of qualitative user research. Usually they're called field studies, and we'll see an example of that. They can happen in person or online. If they are grouped, they are called focus groups. It's always good to have an interview guide to lead the discussion. So we'll see an example of that in action, and you will have to apply it in real life to an actual problem. And it's important to not just follow your question guide. You have to adjust and ask follow-up questions and work on actually creating a sort of experience that will allow the person to open up, and then you can follow up and see based on their answer. You kind of dive deeper. It's all about diving deeper. People who are empathetic, they do this naturally. They can understand and they can dive deeper. Some people who are less empathetic are very practical, rational people, and there is no problem about that. They have to learn about this in a very specific way. So again, user interviews about asking them, being very direct, and there is contextual inquiries. It means watching them. So contextual inquiry is like anthropological thing. You go and you observe people in their natural habitats. So it's about observation and it's about anthropological or ethnographic research. And so you just observe people. You can ask them sometimes questions. I know user researchers who actually just go on an actual experience, and they basically end up wanting to like observe. They just observe and then they ask a few questions. So they go in a company and they observe employees working or interacting or doing something. So you can tell them, okay, could you do that thing, that this task that you're doing with this app? Then you will just watch them. You don't have to ask them. You can ask them follow-up questions, but it's all about watching people do something. So we have focus groups. Focus groups is like user interviews, but this time you do it with groups. It's a little bit tricky because sometimes people can impact each other's thoughts and ideas and opinions. It's called groupthink if you want to think about it. You work more of as a moderator rather than an interviewer. And it really depends. If you're in a collectivist culture, a focus group can bias a lot of the answers you get because people will sometimes be ashamed of saying something or expressing their opinions or opposing another person's opinion. But sometimes it works well if you're a good moderator and facilitator. People discuss and express their opinions and they can bounce ideas off of each other. So we have diary studies. It's when you need user insights across time. So basically, um, diary studies is when you ask users to actually do something across time and then reflect on it and take notes. Because through time, sometimes things happen. People change ideas, people reflect on things, observe things that are different. For example, let's say Instagram. You want people to know how is their behavior with Instagram throughout a week or a month. So you can see that maybe throughout a work week, they don't really interact with Instagram too much. Then in the weekend, they do more. And what are the moments where they go to Instagram? Is it in the restroom or when they're with friends or when they're bored? You want to understand their behavior. And so they kind of document their day to day task. It doesn't have to be like a journal, it doesn't have to be a long paragraph, but it can just be an interactive experience. Where they just log their times or when they used Instagram, or it can be an actual reflection. So a time I had to make be a part of a mindfulness class, and my teacher would every day tell us to journal our day-to-day tasks or daily life and mindset, and see what is happening in our hearts and minds throughout this class. And the journal really helped me so much because I was reflecting, but it helped my teacher because she was able to analyze across all of the students how many of them actually were able to understand um, all of this. Like how many of them are able to interact with the how many of these students actually are learning. And then she created a study at the end that reflected on how did all of these mindfulness teachings become a part of our lives. What moments in particular in all of these 4 months of the class did we get those aha moments. So you can't really do this in one interview or one focus group. It's something that needs time, and we always say beautiful things take time. So there is a very important distinction. As I mentioned, quantitative user research is about the amount of people. It really depends on the target audience and how large it is. And it's better to have more interaction. It's more of like not something that you do one on one. A survey could be quantitative if it only has like scale based questions, but usually it's about analytics, it's about interaction data, it's about databases, so you can use different tools to get you data. But qualitative research is really, when we say qualitative, it comes from quality. So the less, the more. So you don't talk to 500 people, you talk to five people. Five actually is the good number. So you talk to five people and you kind of dive deeper with them, and you get those insights, and you get all of that power in you, and you just like understand deeply. But when you have qualitative, doesn't mean that it's not quality, but there's a lot going on, there is a lot of data, there is a lot of metrics, a lot of numbers, so you just make conclusions based a lot on a lot of data. So just remember this distinction. Okay, so now you have a quiz. I want you to pause and actually think about these questions and answer them. So, all of these questions go over very important aspects that I went over. So, take a moment, pause, look at the quiz questions, answer them. Just put like question one, I'll answer true. Question two, I'll answer false. Or like I'll do F or T, and take that 2 minutes to do it. Think about it, come back to the videos, and then I will give you the quiz answer key. So I'll take a pause and I'll let you pause, answer the questions. All right, so I will dive then. This is the answer key. So obviously, let's start with question one. Qualitative research employs statistical analysis to either confirm or challenge a specific hypothesis rooted in theory or preceding studies. This is actually false. I'm sorry, I made the mistake. This is false because this is quantitative research that uses statistics. We have qualitative research typically involves smaller groups of participants compared to quantitative research. This is true, we mentioned it. Contextual inquiries represent a qualitative user research technique. This is true. Quantitative research methods depend on substantial sample sizes to enhance the credibility of the research. So this is like very powerful. So quantitative, it really depends on a lot of people. We just mentioned it. So this is true. If your goal is to comprehend why users predominantly opt for smartphones over computers, a qualitative research approach would be more suitable. So this is true because you want to actually understand and dive deeper. This is not something that data will give it to you. So hopefully that makes sense. So then next we will dive into an actual user research project. It will be a little bit more than a user research project. It will involve working in a design thinking manner. So you start with a problem statement, you reframe the problem statement, you work on point of view statements, you work on interview guide and questions, you go and do interviews, we work on analysis and synthesis, and then we start ideating and brainstorming. So you will have an actual challenge. You don't have to take it seriously. You can change it, but you can follow the challenge I will give you to do the research on. It will be real life, practical, and then we will dive into what is next, like what is happening next in this whole project, like how I will show you an actual real life project that I worked on to see how user research is really happening on the field. So take a pause now. This was a lot of information. Research what you want to look for, and then we'll dive into a real life project. Okay, so you've reached the end of this introduction to user research. I hope that you are pausing and making all of the exercises, and that you are going to share your work in the through email, or probably if you're able to do it. If not, you can just share it, maybe a link in the comments, and I can come back to you and give you some feedback. But you can reach out to me. There is my contact in the description. Meanwhile, I mentioned the Heuristics evaluation template, so I have made it into a resource. So you can go ahead and download it. You can use it so you can start scoring severity scores. You can use it in your actual projects, and it will really help you. It's a Google Word file, but what you can do is you can create an Excel out of it, or you can any tool that you're using, because it has a little bit of computing that needs to happen. So please go ahead and download it and keep going with the class. And I'm sure things will become clear and you will build your skill set. And let me know how did you find this course. See you in another video.